Hey friends, it's Eric Hultgren and welcome to another episode of the Everything is Marketing podcast. And all month long, we are digging into the business of cannabis as we count down to October 27th, our event entitled Trending Now, Cannabis Industry Insights presented by Select. And today we're talking to Chris Ramos. He's the director of operations for Select. And we're going to talk about the business of cannabis from their perspective. It's super insightful. I hope you dig this podcast. And without further ado, here we go. And my guest this afternoon is Chris Ramos from Select. Chris, how are you, my friend?
I am good. Surviving quarantine and getting ready for the cold Michigan winter here, but I'm great.
Are you from Michigan originally?
Yeah, Michigan, born and raised, as well as the whole team from Select here in Michigan, which is which I think is awesome. We've built a really great team, all Michigan based, so all over the state, and we're really pushing all things Michigan as well as we expand across the state.
And so where I want to start today, Chris, is the story of how Select came to be. You know, one of the fascinating things about my ability to talk to you is you're my first guest who has what I believe you guys call a multi-state operation, right? There's no national operation because it's not legal nationally, but
That's
you
right.
guys have multiple operations across the country. So you've got some perspective that I'd like to dive into. But before we get to that, I think the story of how you guys came to be is fascinating and illustrates how much we still need to understand about what needs to go into this segment of commerce. So can you talk to us about that kind of origin story?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably 5 years ago now, Cameron Forney, our founder, he had a good friend that had a breathing lung problem, and they were into cannabis and they were smoking vape carts, and they sort of started to realize that when they'd smoked some of these carts, they were just, really just coughing super hard. And so Cameron kind of thought to himself, there's got to be a better way. Something is going on here. This should be a clean, pure product. Why are we getting all this coughing? So he started to just tear apart cartridges. He went to every dispensary in town. He started in Oregon, and just started, he had these pliers he called the pliers of truth. And he was just ripping apart cartridges, in his kitchen, in his apartment, and starting to understand, what these cartridges are made of, what products go into them, and realized that there was a silica fiber that was in these cartridges that really wasn't great for inhaling. And so he started to work with a cartridge manufacturer, and basically now is using a cotton fiber that's much less harmful, to be breathing in and to be inhaling. And so that's kind of how, really how Select started. And from there, we kind of designed a better cartridge, and then we started looking at oil specifically. How is the oil being manufactured? How is it being tested? What are we testing for? At what stage of the process are we testing? So, I always make the joke that, with Curaleaf and Select, I mean, we probably test more than anyone in the industry. We test 10 times before a cartridge even hits the shelf. And that's from state to state, and that was really kind of the foundational elements that Select was built on. It was really getting quality oil, whether we're manufacturing ourselves or purchasing it from a third party, working with that third party to meet our standards, and then also just extensive testing, making sure there's no pesticides, there's no residual solvents, there's nothing in this oil but what should be in there.
And so, Chris, we've all had an interesting year. And prior to the lockdown, there was a lot of interest in 420. Obviously, 420 hits, and you and I were joking before the podcast started that you guys were deemed essential at that moment. And so that interest leading into 420, obviously sales happened, and they were, I'm assuming, very good. But what was fascinating to me is watching how consumers seemingly started to understand how to do this in the state of Michigan, in part because of the lockdown and because you were deemed essential. And I won't steal your joke, but cannabis was essential in a lockdown,
Sure.
right? Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about it all the time. I mean, if this had happened 2 years ago, it would have been a joke to even think that, cannabis would have been an essential, an essential business. And so, there's a big silver lining there that really gives cannabis a lot of legitimacy, from a regulation standpoint, from a consumer standpoint. And then just being in quarantine, people started to realize, I've got a lot of anxiety, I'm bored, whatever it may be, and started kind of turning to cannabis to kind of, find some new experience. And we really saw, sales across the market really start to explode, and, like you said, we're ramping up for 420. We had, all kinds of things on the docket on the marketing side for events and all. I was going to fly an airplane over Ann Arbor for Hash Bash. All this stuff was lined up. And of course, it all just fizzled. Really silver lining is that cannabis started to become more important to people throughout this quarantine and the pandemic, and they're finding relief from it and finding some joy and finding a different perspective. And so it's really been great for us. I mean, we've had our challenges through quarantine as well, but thank goodness it's deemed essential.
How has this year been for you? If you were to give, global pandemic aside, we're only 2 years into adult use cannabis in the state of Michigan. How are you guys feeling as to where we are right now? Is it ahead of where you thought it would be? I think Matt Abel in my earlier interview said that this industry moves really, really fast and really, really slow all at the same time. So,
I couldn't agree more.
Interested in your perspective on where you think the industry is right now.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if I had to give this year a grade as far as sales and scale, I mean, really, we're doing well. It's a solid B plus, A minus, somewhere in there. I'm sure things could be better. Would it be better without the pandemic? Maybe, probably, but at the same time, it's been okay. So we've been able to survive, and the market is moving fast and slow, as Matt Abel has said. And you have to be ready to pivot when you can, and you have to be able to run when you can, and that's just kind of part of the industry that is cannabis, and probably any large emerging industry as well. There's a lot of new people, a lot of new people new to business, a lot of people new to cannabis, and so you have a lot of different personalities coming in, and a lot of different perspectives and politics coming in. So there's definitely a lot of starting, stopping, running, going slow, and you just have to kind of be ready for it.
And so, Chris, one of the things that people might not necessarily understand, although if they are on your side of the fence, they most certainly do, this is a really complex way to run a business, right? There's a lot of things that you have to do that other businesses don't have to deal with. But I'm interested in, how did you get into this industry? What got you to sitting in this chair right now having this conversation with me?
Sure. So my background's really entrepreneurship. I've owned, grown, and sold a few businesses in Michigan. Most recently was a manufacturing business where I really honed a lot of lean manufacturing skills, process improvement. We took building custom vehicles from 8 weeks down to 10 days through sort of building a culture of lean improvement and continuous improvement. And then, coupled with, I've always sort of been at arm's reach of cannabis. I've always been a consumer for a long time, and sort of dabbled here and there a little bit in the actual, commerce of it. And so when the opportunity arose that Select was coming to Michigan and was sort of looking for someone to run the operation in Michigan, the stars kind of aligned. Looking for someone who can run manufacturing, who's sort of who's run businesses, because essentially, prior to the Curaleaf acquisition, especially, we're really more or less running our own business out here in Michigan, of course, with the support of everyone from the West Coast. But we were the fifth state in Select's portfolio, and we were the first state out of the West Coast. So we were very far from headquarters, and had to be able to be nimble and pivot and make smart decisions out here on our own with support.
What are some of the things, if people are thinking about getting involved in cannabis as an industry, what are some of the pitfalls that they should be on the lookout for? Like, if you had a top 3 list of things to be like, oh, don't forget, this thing's going to come sideways, right at you. You should know that this is going to happen.
Well, know that everything is going to go wrong if and when it can. Really, things are, you have to stay up on regulation. Regulations are constantly changing and pivoting, and small nuances. A metal test that wasn't there a few months ago is now there, and you have to be ready for that, especially as growers. Plan to have some government relations, whether that's some sort of lobbyist or someone that kind of gets you an ear to those regulations, so you can stay a little bit ahead of it. Because if you can't stay ahead of it, then you get smacked with it. Now you've got all this product sitting on your shelf that all of a sudden might not be passable or has to be relabeled as something else, or has to be retested. And those are big expenses. I mean, it's an expensive industry to be in. So, being well capitalized cannot be understated. You definitely have to have capital to get into this business and have working capital and be ready to spend some of that and lose some of that on, again, testing and just redoing things as things change and move and pivot. I think that those are probably the biggest things, I think, to really be ready for. It's a roller coaster, but it's a super fun roller coaster. But you got to be ready. You got to be ready to take it from every angle. You have to stay informed. Reading the, staying up on the LARA website, the MRA website, reading news articles, and keeping a good solid network. Especially if you're doing this in Michigan, keeping a solid network of industry friends, because we all talk and we all sort of kind of help each other out and keep each other abreast of something that's coming down the pipe. And so building a good, strong network is probably also very important.
And so, Chris, I know you're not Nostradamus, but as you said a couple minutes ago, you guys are in 23 states. And so I'll ask you the question I've asked our other two guests this month. In your best guess, do you feel like this will be a state-by-state decision for a long time, or will there be a moment where this becomes federally legalized?
I think it will become federally legal, but I think that that they're going to let the states come online and sort of figure this out within the states. And once the states realize how to collect tax, then the feds can come in and say, guess what? We're also going to add tax to that. And it'd be very simple. I think it's a much simpler process from a national standpoint once all the states are online, to sort of regulate, because then they just sort of bolt on to that. That's kind of been my assumption. But I mean, like you said, I'm not Nostradamus. I have no idea, no inclination. I know, Curaleaf definitely wanted to be, federally legal, probably sooner than later. We do a business in a lot of states, and it would probably make things, significantly easier to navigate.
Chris Ramos, okay, if people want to learn more about Select, what's the best way for them to start? Because one of the things that we are talking about on October 27th will most certainly be, the Canna Curious audience who hasn't really experimented in this space, doesn't really know how to start. And so if they're interested, where should they start?
Sure. Selectoil.com is, it's our website. It's a great website. Curaleaf.com is our parent company. They can kind of dive into all things Curaleaf, our vertical operations in all these states. And then, if you're an Instagrammer, select.better, I believe is our Instagram. I should probably check that. Yeah, I mean, we're very active on social and our website, and there's a ton of information. And again, it's, we're really trying to standardize what we're doing from state to state and make sure that safety standards are there and quality standards are there. There's a lot of new brands popping up, and some of them are amazing and super high quality standards, but some of them are sort of just, crafted out of a basement and not. So you really want to dive into whatever brand you're looking at and make sure that, they're doing due diligence before, you're just consuming this product, without being educated on it.
Chris Ramos, thank you so much for the time, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric.
And there he goes. A big thanks to Chris Ramos from Select, our presenting sponsor for our event, October 27th. Trending now, Cannabis Industry Insights. I cannot wait to see you there. And we'll be back with another episode of the Everything is Marketing podcast.